Hi, Violet. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I don't have to tell you or anybody else that there are so many great things that Harold Ramis is known for, funny and memorable movies especially. So, was it easy coming up with the name for this book using Ghostbusters as a central theme?
Um, Ghostbusters Daughter was only my sort of working title as I
Hmm.
was writing.
Right.
It just seemed, sort of funny in a way. I had really loved the movie Coal Miner's Daughter as
Yeah.
a kid, so it just was sort of a play on that. But then,
Okay.
the truth is that Egon is the character that my dad is sort of most well known for.
Hmm.
So the Ghostbusters, thing is just really touches people immediately. They have their memories ready to go. So it just seemed like sort of a natural fit.
Definitely. Well, it's definitely attention getting too, because, with Ghostbusters still kind of in the fandom mindset now, I mean, you see anything related to that, you have to pay attention. So it's definitely good on that front as well. But it goes without saying again that people will remember his film work for many years to come with new generations of fans getting exposed to even movies like Ghostbusters now. But when someone makes that kind of an impact, it's easy for people just to kind of associate them for films or stories, which is a good thing. But then, sometimes people really think that means they know them, but they don't really know the person. And I assume that had to be part of the motivation for writing this book as well, for people to really get to know your dad beyond what everybody knows from the film and entertainment world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I just really felt so comforted by the response that I got from strangers after my dad passed away.
Hmm.
People reaching out and sharing, these really sweet memories of watching his films, or, maybe they met him once, and it just meant so much to me that I wanted to be able to give back to all these people who were also really missing him and feeling a sense of loss.
Yeah. Well, you definitely get into some variety of details about your life together, and you're not afraid to share things that some people might even judge in some form or fashion. Everything from seeing certain movies as a kid, drug
Mhm.
use, affairs, pregnancy, divorce, things that all kinds of people deal with. And while that may surprise some people, by the time you finish the book, you realize if Harold had literally written this book with you, the approach I think would have been pretty much the same, because there seemed to be a very, very much a kind of openness and a damn the conventional themes approach to your lives. So it seems
Yeah,
like it fits anyway.
I think that's true. And I think, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine somebody knowing him through his work and thinking, wow, what a wholesome guy. I mean, this is the person that, co-wrote Animal House and
Right.
Caddyshack. I mean, he certainly had his share of wild times. And, I don't think I was glorifying that
Oh
necessarily,
no.
but I
Right.
just really wanted to be honest
Right.
and to sort of show that, people go through all kinds of things and really, like you said, if you're open and you are able to, have the support of the people who love you, then you can sort of get through anything.
Yeah, and I mean that was really one of the best ways to show that when it comes to the perceptions that come up that just come with Hollywood. Because this is a great way to show that this is not only an actor, writer, director, but he's also a person who is a father, a husband, and a human being working his way through life like everyone else.
Mhm. And he was never really the sort of Hollywood guy.
Right.
I mean, he lived in LA for 20 years, but I don't know that he ever really felt at home there. He grew up in Chicago. He always loved Chicago. He moved back there, when I was in college, and
Hmm.
and he really was a down to earth sort of regular person. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he did enjoy the perks that his life
Of
brought him,
course. Yeah.
and he took advantage of them. But he sort of never forgot. At the end of the day, you still what is it? Take your socks off one foot at a time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is, I mean, there's plenty of stories out there you read of people who have big Hollywood lives, and the challenges is they tend to sometimes get so immersed in that they neglect things like family. And I think that's one of the many great things about the stories you share is it's proof he was never going to let that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky that he was so present, and it was very important to him to be connected, not only with his children, but with his parents too. I mean,
Hmm.
my grandfather lived to be 94, and they've talked all the time, and he visited him, regularly, and yeah, I think he really felt grounded by his family.
Well, I know that the original motivation for this book was based on the plan that you had with him to write a book about parenting. Um,
Mhm.
Yet at the same time, in this book, you get a pretty good sense of not only his approach to it, but how it impacted you throughout your life. And since the parenting book never actually came to fruition in its original plan,
Mhm.
how do you feel about the way this particular book talks about his approach to parenting?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know that he had an approach. In the beginning, at least, I think it was very improvisational. um, and I think he just really sort of trusted his instinct, and I think that not having such a fixed idea of what kind of parent you wanted to be,
Yeah.
let him really discover it along the way. And he was, sort of very flexible and willing to learn, and those were great things for him as a dad, really good qualities. I know before I had kids, I had a lot of opinions about, what good parents do.
Sure.
And I think it all just kind of goes right out the window when you're faced with this small person with a lot of big ideas.
Yeah, in fact, when it comes to having children, I laughed in the book at the line about loving something so deeply who will at some point slam the door in your face and tell you that they're ruining their life.
Yes.
That was a great line. But, at the same time, it's pretty crystal clear what your dad meant to you throughout his life and continues to mean to you today. When I think about everything you talk about and experience together, it's not hard to realize why you had that connection with him. And I think a lot of parents, of course, that's what they want, inevitably. That's why that joke is kind of funny. They want their kids to feel that way. You want them to feel that way about their father or mother. Do you think that this book maybe even in some way gives parents some insights on ways to form a good bond with your kids, even though, like you said, there's no universal way of approaching it?
I mean, it's hard for me to say because it's so close to me. But yes, I mean, people have told me that, it's sort of encouraging to know that you can make mistakes and it can still be okay, that you don't have to have all the answers. And that, even somebody like my dad, who so many people really respected and admired, he wasn't always perfect. But it doesn't make me love him any less.
Sure.
It didn't hurt, in any significant way the relationship we had, and I think, that I certainly hope that people can go off and have some of that in their own lives. I mean, if a book could do that.
I think so because, it seemed like even through, the best times and even the challenging times, nothing permanently broke.
Yeah.
There were some times, occasional scratch, but the scratch always healed.
Yes.
And there was a mutual want for that, even at the toughest times. I mean, due to the way that you share the bond you had with him, and the way you were always able to go to him for anything and everything,
Mhm.
it's clear how that impacted several things you had to deal with throughout this book. I think you come pretty clear with that. I mean, ranging from, your own challenges to when you heard about everything ranging from the affair and the child with Amy Heckerling
Mhm.
and the marital challenges and the changes in his life. I mean, then being with you as you dealt with, your own challenges like pregnancy, children, and marriage. I mean, if that bond had been any different, I have to think you might have handled some of those things differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. And I think had I not had such a strong foundation and knowing that, whatever happened or however badly I had screwed up, um, that it wasn't the end.
Yeah.
There was still a chance to make it okay,
Yeah.
and to learn from it and grow. And he certainly always wanted to keep growing as a person, and he was very, curious about ideas and philosophy and spirituality, and if you want to look at history or religion, so much of it is about, correcting your course as you go,
Yeah.
and finding forgiveness and, finding a way to work together and to get through things together. And that's what we did.
Yeah, and I mean, even later, proof of that, you even had a chance to finally connect with Molly, and
Hmm.
your half sister, which was awkward and uneasy thing on that day, obviously. But I get the impression that now things must be pretty good.
They are, and really with her and also with my brothers. I mean, I think for us having each other now, it's not ever going to be the same as when my dad was here, when our dad was here. But at least we can all sort of get together and bring our pieces of him into the room and remind each other of what we had, because it's easy to forget sometimes as
Yeah.
time passes. But we all have it, and we all got it in very different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we can now give that to each other.
Yeah. Well, we touched on Ghostbusters a second ago. When you cover his movies in the book, I love how not only do you talk about your dad's approach to everything and how things played out on the set, but I also loved listening to your experiences, being able to be there sometimes, and how everyone dealt with production and reactions to the film. Those were really great elements to the book. Back when Ghostbusters was released, being a geek and geek culture then and now were very different.
So
And
different.
and yeah, I mean now with it being so mainstream, I mean Ghostbusters is still a big part of the fandom, and Egon is certainly celebrated in that. And I'm sure that's been a real treat, and you've loved watching that endure over the years, and have your dad's legacy continuously celebrated, at least especially in that aspect of the fandom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has really grown. I mean, there definitely was not the same sort of respect and appreciation for nerds
Yeah,
back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there just wasn't. And so, it's great now also I get messages from people saying, it was so amazing to see a character that looked like me and acted like me,
yeah,
the quiet kid,
yeah.
who knew everything but didn't always have to be talking, or that people went into careers in science, because of Egon, and that's so incredible and inspiring. And I really don't think that I mean, he knew that people loved the movie, but I don't think he really knew how much it touched people's lives.
Yeah, and when you think about this recent announcement that Ivan Reitman's son is
Hmm.
going to continue that timeline with the new film, how do you think your dad would have reacted to that? And do you think he'd want to be a part of that if he could?
I mean, yes, I think if he were alive, he would have definitely loved to participate in a third, Ghostbusters film. But, as I said, when Paul Feig's Ghostbusters came out in
Mm-hmm.
2016, he would have been really happy about that too. I mean, he didn't feel possessive or, territorial about the idea. He just wanted these ideas to continue. He wanted people to laugh.
Yeah,
Um, so I don't think that he thought of Ghostbusters as something sacred that should never be touched. I
yeah.
think he would be so happy that Jason is now sort of picking up the torch to carry forward. And, I feel like he would be really proud with how loved Ghostbusters still is.
And I'm sure you have people tell you all their favorites. I really liked his cameo a lot in As Good as It Gets.
I know, me too.
I mean, it sounds like there's elements of that guy that was kind of consistent with, elements of his own personality, because, you had this woman that was Helen Hunt's character who was just down on her luck, and this guy comes in and he just genuinely cares about the entire situation and wants to do what he can to help.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, even going back to one of the first things you said about people, thinking they know him because they know his work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is he put so much of himself into everything that he did. I mean, that certainly was a huge part of who he was. Egon was also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the dad in Knocked Up is so close to, his sort of natural vibe. Like, it wasn't, I mean, yes, he was acting, he was writing characters, but he wasn't so far off. I mean, he really put his whole heart and soul into it, and I think that comes through.
I liked Multiplicity too.
Yeah, I mean, there really is something for everyone, I think, in all of his movies, even though they're not all perfect films or, every joke doesn't hit. I mean, I really think, I mean, yes, of course, I'm biased, but, I think there's a lot there. So hopefully people will keep watching and enjoying.
Multiplicity, I quote that all the time. My wife will come home and I'll go, "Did you bring me a monkey?"
Yeah, I like pizza.
Yeah, I like pizza. We touched on perceptions a second ago about being famous in Hollywood. And as with most things in the news, and in gossip and 24/7 news cycles, I mean, the controversies on sets and among actors and writers, all the bad stuff gets the most attention. Sometimes it's a power struggle or explosive fights or egos or demands. And I once read years ago about your father's belief in empowering everyone to infuse their talents and contributions into a collaborative project.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why so many people liked working with him.
Yeah, I mean, he started out in improv in theater in Second City in Chicago, and so that really gave him, a foundation of collaboration. And he would always say, comedy can't happen with just one person.
Yeah.
You need someone else to laugh. So he really liked making people laugh. People really worked hard to make him laugh. And it's so interesting. I read a book about Caddyshack by Chris Nashawati,
Okay.
and he talked, so much about how even on set, in filming, Dad would say, "Okay, who has an idea for how to make this work?" He had never directed before. He knew that there were people that knew more than he did on set, so he wanted to make sure that everybody's talent was used to its utmost effect. And yeah, I think how much fun that would be to be on that set and have the director pull you over and, ask for your opinion on something. The other thing that I was going to say about the drama sort of around filmmaking and celebrity these days, I really miss when a movie just came out in the theater and I'd never heard anything about it before.
Oh, right.
That seems unimaginable today.
Yeah.
You hear about something the minute a contract is signed and which actors are getting picked, and everyone sort of weighs in with their opinion. And that's a really hard way to make art, which
No kidding.
These things are supposed to be. I mean, I don't feel too bad for people making movies these days, but, I do wish that there was, a little more separation between, the finished product and everyone's opinions about it.
You were talking about, not being afraid to ask. I think that's such a good quality too, because sometimes, especially if you're kind of the leader of the group, it goes back to the difference between being a leader and a boss, and it's always good to have someone ask somebody else versus wing it and pretend like when you may not.
Yeah.
And it was, I was trying to remember, there was a story you told, I think it was one of his first directing projects where the DP came up and said, "Where do you want to shoot this?"
Yeah. And he said, "Oh, this way." And they said, "Oh, okay, should we move all of the trucks and
Yeah.
tents?" And he said, "Oh, no, maybe not. Where do you think we should put the camera?"
That was great.
Yeah. I mean, the great lesson for your first day directing.
That's right.
For sure.
Do you want to get the trucks and craft services in the shot? No. Maybe we should move it then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other thing that I thought was really cool was, and it's kind of consistent with that approach to, working with everybody, not, just maybe this group or that group, because you cite several occasions in the book where if he met you and worked with you in any way, he'd be always willing to help you, give you a recommendation, help you get a job. I mean, whether you were in like the main, production group or, some of the, lower level people too, that, if he met you and made a connection, he was always more than happy to help you out.
He really was a generous person. and believed in paying it forward. I mean, it didn't take anything away from him, to connect someone with an opportunity. It's just good karma
Yeah.
and being a good person. And he just really genuinely was.
Now, in the book, you talked about his kind of intense confrontation with Bill Murray on Groundhog Day. Was something we just pointed out was not common at all on
Mhm.
his sets. And I really didn't even know much about this, and I didn't know that they had quit talking for about 20 years. But
Yeah.
it was good to hear that they did have a chance to, reconnect later
Hmm.
before he left us.
Yes, I mean, I'm glad that they had some resolution too. I think it was really hard for my dad, even though he took it in stride and,
Yeah,
he wasn't broken up about it. But I think he missed his friend and collaborator. And, in any relationship, especially when it's that close and you sort of start out together so young, I think it's very hard to not need a break at
yeah.
some point. So, they had their break and they were able to reconnect at the end, like you said. And either way, I mean, they left behind all of this great work together.
Indeed.
Um, these stories that people just love and keep coming back to, and so that's a great thing.
Well, in the book, you said when you really started to face the reality of losing him, that you felt like a child and an adult at the same time. And
The most like a child. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and that makes total sense. And I think lots of people obviously can relate to that on many levels. Has your book been helpful to people who've faced things or dealt with things and had that same type of feeling? Has anybody told you anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for people who had super close relationships with their fathers,
Hmm.
it touches something. I think for people who didn't have that, it touches something. For people whose, loved ones are still alive, maybe it makes you appreciate it a little more. For those
Sure.
that are gone, it's something that unfortunately is part of life, losing people that you love. It's horrible, horrible, horrible,
Yeah.
um, even at its best. I mean, we had a great relationship. I have so much to be thankful for. There wasn't anything unresolved or ugly. And yet it's still terrible. It sucks, you
Yeah.
know? And so that is something I think that so many people can relate to.
It never
Um,
becomes okay now, I
you just
guess.
learn to live with it,
Yeah.
and then something will happen and you'll think, oh God, I feel it so strongly in this moment. And then you go back, go about your business and life goes on, but you just sort of never know when it's going to hit you.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the book, you talk about the incredible outpouring of thoughts and support that you got from family, friends, colleagues, and of course, fans. And I know some of those words surprised you, especially when people talked about how your dad inspired and impacted people. What are some of those comments and messages that you got that really stand out to you to this day?
Mm. I mean, someone wrote that they'd had a very rough childhood, and that watching, these comedies that my dad had been a part of was sort of the bright spot of their childhood. It helps them get through all these other
Mm,
traumatic things, and
yeah.
that was really intense. And I'm so glad that he had the movies, but still, like you sort of, as people have said about the book, you want to go back and hug the kid.
Yeah.
Um, I think also, just people who really, I always wanted to meet him. I carried around, this letter that I thought I would have him, read one day, and I never got to do it. I mean, it's just sort of all about longing at
Sure.
the end of the day. I mean, we all have these heroes we look up to, and, one way or another, we lose them.
Yeah.
And, and it's hard. And, I really, I mean, I can't tell you how much it meant to me to hear from people who were really struggling with with the loss of him or just loss in general. Because I think, it's very easy to feel alone with it.
Yes.
and to forget that so many others have gone through the same thing. So when he passed, I really felt that, certainly the book has brought, a lot of that to me, which is great in one way and also hard, because I think if I go somewhere to talk about the book, someone comes up to me and is very emotional and they want me to be emotional too. And,
Yeah.
I can't always share it with people face to face,
Yeah.
but hopefully, they're able to get it from the book and feel something. And that's really the best that I could do.
Well, and again, even on the more positive side, thanks to
Wah, wah.
no, really. I mean, there's goodness in a lot of this, even in the tougher things, because people, you get those opportunities to find out how many people he impacted, and it's interesting. I mean, you've got all kinds of people that are in that in this industry that you go and do your work. Hopefully you enjoy the work, and clearly he did. It goes out, you read what a few critics say. Of course, now you read what everybody thinks on social media, but and then it's done. But when you get the chance, you don't always realize the big impact. You don't always hear the things that that deep, and sometimes it just takes something like this for things to come out.
And listen, I mean, what he was really able to do so successfully was talk about serious things in a really funny way.
That's right.
And find humor even in these big ideas of, existence and thinking about Groundhog Day. Like, that could have been a not very funny, heavy movie. And
Right.
he just was able to find that sort of magic balance of, we're going to think and we're going to laugh, and so I think, hopefully the book does a little of that also.
Well, as I was mentioning, the other thing that seems to be kind of great now, I would think, versus something that, wasn't really even around maybe 10, 15 years ago, at least not like today, thanks to fandom, what fandom and geek culture has become in recent years, you have conventions everywhere. Yeah. And, those things are really popular today. And I've noticed that you've even had a chance to attend some of those and meet fans face to face and be able to celebrate your dad's work that way.
Yes, and that has also been a very unexpected sort of gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at Wizard World in Chicago last year. Honestly, the last place I ever imagined being. And, there were a couple hundred Ghostbusters there.
Yeah.
And they were so warm and welcoming. And, they just said, well, if you're a Ghostbusters daughter, that means you're our daughter too.
Nice.
And they sort of brought me in for this group hug. And, it was so overwhelming and beautiful and just delightful. Just see and feel his legacy so presently and in such a really sweet way, honoring him. So, yeah, I really appreciate the fans that, bring all the positivity to it and care. I know that there's a dark side to it as well, but I don't really engage with that
Sure.
element. And I've just really seen mostly extremely positive, wonderful people.
Yeah, proton packs, spores, moles, and fungus are still very popular today.
Oh, I mean, the jumpsuits. I mean, and people they decorate their cars, they
Yeah.
make their own gear and equipment. I mean, it's really unbelievable. So much creativity, so much passion.
You walk down the street, you might get stopped for carrying a realistic looking nuclear accelerator on your back.
Careful these days.
Well, as a longtime fan of your dad's, I really liked the opportunity to get to know him better through your eyes in this book, and it's been a real pleasure and an honor talking to you about him. I wish you continued success, and I'm so glad we were able to celebrate Harold Ramis and your book today on this show, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was really nice talking to you, and I appreciate your thoughtful questions and that you read it and loved it. It means a lot.